What's good, everybody? It's your boy back with another reaction video, and I will be reacting to. I did some push-ups, and I think I overdid it. Anyway, I also lifted some weights. I think I might overdid that too, but anywho, I'll be reacting to 5 real hospital horror stories. And this is from Darkness Prevails YouTube channel. So I've seen some of this stuff before. I've gotten recommended, especially when I looked at like. So I think the first time I got recommended anything from any of these horror narrations channels, it was I think it was Mr. Nightmare and Unit 522. And then when I looked at those, then boom, I started getting this one. Paranormal Scholar. It's a female that does it. She has a sexy ass voice. Like when she be there, and she's always calm, and it's very unsettling how calm she is. Cause you listen to what she's talking about, and like it's very creepy. But Nightmare Files. Uh, there's some other ones like the animated ones. I think one's called Wincy Entertainment. They do like they take people's narrations and then they draw animated cartoons for them. Yeah. But anyway, hospitals have always been scary because I remember my dad told me when I was very young. I think I might have been, I don't know, 8. He was like, I think that was around. Wait, how old was I? I think that's when my grandmother passed away. Well, his mother passed away. She had like diabetes. Where black folks said she had the sugar, but cause I remember she had her foot amputated. But cause she passed away on my birthday. I'm trying to remember how old I was. I want to say I was 8. What year was that? Is that 95? How am I getting that mixed up with my grandfather died on my mother's side? What? Anyway, it was somewhere around there. And my dad was telling me, hospital ain't no place to get better. Hospital, you don't get better in hospitals. Which I was like, that's not true. People, I mean, well, they keep you there to really observe you. I mean, I said, technically, I guess he's right because they discharge you, and you could still be suffering some symptoms, but they're like, well, you can get better at home. And they'll send you home and you get better at home. But I mean, you could have got better in the hospital. It's just that they like, why keep you here? You might as well go home, and we can use this room for somebody else who's really sick. But I mean, hey, without hospitals, we still be dying from smallpox, measles. I mean, we die from the flu, but that could be because people don't get flu shots or don't go to the hospital and it turn into like pneumonia and shit like that, or bronchitis. Because I just said, like, hospitals are definitely a necessity, but they are creepy as hell. I've seen some like abandoned hospitals. When I was a kid, it was like what was that? It wasn't a hospital. It was a clinic that was abandoned. So it was a much smaller building, and all the windows have been knocked out, and they put boards up because the kids knocked all the windows out. Cause that's just thing kids do. Abandoned buildings. They were like, well, it's because I did that when I was a kid. Like, let's play a game. Who can knock out the most windows? And then the higher the window is, the more points it was. So you can knock out, like, it'd be like, if this is 3 floors, you would say, okay, well, the first floor is 1 point, second floor is you say 2 points, third floor is 3 points. Just because you make up points based on how tall the building is. And then you just, of course, everyone trying to knock out the top floor because that'd be the most points, obviously. Especially if the top floor had, more windows. But there was a place I lived, but it wasn't a clinic. It used to be a pharmacy, and they closed down like right around the time we moved over there. And I think I've told this before, where it was right next to my apartment complex, and me and somebody else went in there. It was like a noise. Oh, sorry, that was two different places. I lived by them, but this one I lived right by, and it was like we heard like a noise. Was it behind us? I can't remember if it was behind us or in front of us. I remember the other story I told, but that was a crackhead. And well, I don't know if they were a crackhead. They were a homeless person. They looked homeless anyway, so they probably think that we were trying to do something to them because people robbed them, beat them up for no reason, or beat them up and robbed them. But at that place, because like I said, it used to be a pharmacy, and it was right next to right next to our apartment. It was a building. It's like a little small, kind of like, basically like little alley, and then our apartment complex. The door on the back was open, because we always assumed it was locked, and we just opened it and it opened up. we said, how about we just try the knob, and we opened, and it just opened. The front window and everything had been boarded up. And I want to say something fell. We went inside. Something fell. There was another time where I was with some friends of mine, and something fell behind us. One of my friends froze, and me and my other friend that was in there, we ran. We like, as soon as that, boom, we were gone. But anyway, I don't want to get too much in. I've been talking almost 7 minutes. So. It's like, it's 37 minutes long. Shit. Did not know that, but anyway, here we go.
Let's begin today's episode by shouting out the folks out there that
I'm
are working right now
because
during these scary times. Medical workers, grocery store workers, mail and delivery drivers, and anyone and everyone
he
right
found
now
this during
who's
the
still
quarantine.
working outside their homes.
I said it because some of these
Thank you for what you do.
are old
and
that I'm
Godspeed.
watching. Some of these, I
In
think,
light of the
one of
chaotic
these are like 4
situation in
years old.
hospitals right now, I figured some spooky stories set in hospitals would be perfect. Of course, these stories won't concern current events, because that just doesn't seem right. Enjoy these stories and remember to send me your scary experiences at darkstories.org. I'm currently on the lookout for stories about lockdowns, unrelated to current events of course, as well as sea creatures and out-at-sea stories. Now, let's begin. You get used to it. From The Other Malfoy. I worked as a security guard at one of the local hospitals, and despite what I'm going to tell you,
it's
a pretty great place to work. Plentiful hours, pay is good, and the nurses are downright sweet. That being said, it is still a hospital, and as such, it comes with its bad things. I confess, and forgive me if I come across as a little bit morbid, I've been in the presence of more death in the first 6 months on the job than the previous 30 years of my entire life. But that's not exactly what this is about. No, this story is about the hospital basement. I had initially been hired to work a specific area of the hospital, and I had daytime hours.
In the past 6 months than I have in my whole life. Well, yeah, because you work at a mortuary now.
And how to make that money. This meant I had free range to patrol the whole property. One of the areas I got to patrol was the basement. Contrary to what you might think, it's a pretty busy part of the building. X-ray department, custodian, engineering, food prep, those are just some of the many departments that fill the basement. So it's not exactly a spooky, damp, and dark place. But once 8 p.m. hits and the vast majority of employees have gone home, that basement gets quiet. And that's when the incidents began. It was my first week as patrol officer,
It's all in
and
your
so
mind.
far, it had been rather uneventful, which I was fine with. I'd had 5 years' experience with private security in other areas, and I was hoping for less action for a while. One night, I was making
Wish
my
I could
rounds
react to
in the
these
basement
laying down.
when I heard footsteps.
I seen some YouTuber chick. She's reacting.
Normally, this is no big deal,
She's like kind
but
of
it was
lays
very
like
late,
down
so it drew my
on her
attention.
bed while she's watching
Still,
stuff.
I wasn't thinking
But
it was
I'm
a
not
big
a
deal.
cute little girl.
Maybe a nurse
so
had to
I can't
grab
do
something, or a visitor took a
People be like, "What the
hilariously
fuck this
big
dude
wrong
do?"
turn. So I wandered over in that direction.
I'll probably end up falling
As I
asleep.
approached the corner, I checked the wall mirror. For those of you who don't know, hospitals have ball-shaped mirrors to allow staff to check around corners, thus preventing any
You don't
girly
run
finger
into
benders.
you don't run into people.
When I did this, I saw nothing. No people, no shadows, no movement of any sort. I rounded the corner to make sure, and it was an empty hallway. Only place they could turn into were the elevators, which I would have heard the ding from if someone had entered them. It was strange, but I shrugged it off. Probably my brain messing with me. A similar incident happened a few days later. While checking to make sure engineering didn't leave their equipment in plain sight, again,
It's
I
funny, I
suddenly
get this
heard
shirt at the
voices.
hospital. I was doing physical therapy.
I couldn't make out
Well,
what
I
they
was
were saying,
getting physical
but it was for
therapy.
sure human voices. I went to check, out of curiosity more than anything else. But no matter where I walked, the voices always seemed distant. I didn't see anyone, and I must have walked the entire basement, but the voices always sounded so distant. Then, suddenly, it went quiet, just like that. It was as if they had disappeared, left the area. How very strange, but again, I chalked it up to nothing unusual. Maybe a custodian left a radio or podcast on. In my mind, it was all easily explained and no big deal. While that could have been explained easily enough, this next one was unnerving, because I still cannot explain it. It was another day, another basement patrol. I was walking down a large stretch of hallway when, in front of me, I noticed a set of doors closing. These are fire doors that are held open magnetically and automatically close upon the fire alarm going off, which incidentally had happened earlier. A false alarm, though. Clearly, these two hadn't been pushed open after the all clear. So I walked towards them to do the job myself. Then one of them opened up. Not swung open aggressively, but just casually opened up, like someone was just passing through. This caused me to stop in my tracks in shock. These doors are quite heavy. Nobody could have just yanked it open and ducked out of sight like that. This door was pushed to the wall all the way in a smooth motion, not shoved, not opened slightly. Unless there was a very specifically located hurricane in that spot, those doors were not hit by a sudden draft. Needless to say, I patrolled a more populated area.
So it was a
that night.
ghost, obviously. Duh.
There were also the cold spots. So many cold spots in that basement. It wasn't wind or air conditioning. These were specific moments of cold that randomly disappeared shortly afterwards. These were not normal. They were everywhere. Not just the same spots every time, different spots. Spots where it should have been warm.
Because of
Like by the
ghost
food prep kitchen
inside of
or
you.
near the CT scan room. It just didn't really make sense. A few weeks of this, and I was just doing my best to ignore it. Job paid well, and I didn't want to abandon ship like that. But that nearly changed one evening. I was on
Yeah,
another
like, almost
basement
said,
patrol.
"Fuck it."
Woo-hoo, I guess. Sadly, I couldn't skip it, or say that I did. The higher-ups would know. They always know. So I'm back again, late at night, in the creepy, empty basement, reminding myself that my car will be paid off a lot faster with this salary. I approached the corner from the first incident.
Gotta do what you gotta do.
Coincidentally,
Even if you had to fight
Instinctively, I
fucking
checked the wall
ghosts.
mirror. I froze. There I saw a figure around the corner. Not a person, but a human-shaped black mass. Just standing there, just around the corner. I'm horrified at this point. My mind was already on high alert. Now it was on red alert. I tried to reason with myself. Is it a smudge on the mirror? No, they clean those things daily. I was scared, shaking, wishing I had a fellow guard with me. But what good would that really
So
do,
we can
honestly?
both get fucked up.
I'm praying to God, Odin, Ra, freaking Santa Claus at this point, praying that this thing does not decide to move towards me. I'm standing there for what seemed like forever, when it finally walks the opposite direction of me. Defying all sense of reason, I decided to poke my head around the corner, try to get a look at this thing. It was gone by then, disappeared.
Of course it was.
I even checked the mirror again, and it was clear as well. Just me in the basement. I scrambled upstairs on a sprint and spent the shift around the nurse's station, expecting very little sleep that night when I made it home. A couple of months later, short of the aforementioned cold spots, things had calmed down. I began working an earlier shift, and I was down in the basement with a coworker doing the rounds when I heard the sound of voices. Now, admittedly, this could be anyone that time of day, but I was still quite paranoid about the basement, so my mind instantly goes to the worst possible explanation.
Ghost?
I stopped, then turned to my
Is it
coworker.
fucking ghost?
Then I asked, probably sounding freaked out, if they could hear the voices.
I thought it was just
To
me.
my immense relief, they said yes, and I calmed down. Then my coworker said, "You get used to it." I instantly stopped and stared at them.
What?
What do you mean by that? I asked.
You're used to the
Voices.
wailing
Weird
of the
noises, all
damned.
that crap. Work here long enough and you just get used to it, especially down here. I assume you've seen or heard something, judging by how you looked like a deer in the headlights just now. I nod and explain my experiences. They say, "Yeah, most of us have all had similar incidents when patrolling down here. Don't worry about it. You'll learn to shrug it off." I'll add quickly that this coworker is older than me and has been with the company for about 15 years,
Oh, damn.
which to me explained how they were so casual and nonchalant about it, while I was losing my
5
mind.
years to retire.
But why this area? I asked. Never anywhere else. Do you really have to ask? They laughed. And then it hit me, and I almost kicked myself for not figuring it out sooner.
There was a morgue down there or something?
The silhouette, the footsteps, the voices, the door, even the majority of cold spots. They all happened within a close proximity of the morgue. I'd been given a tour of the facility when I started, but seeing as I was assigned a specific post when I began, I kinda just forgot about the morgue and where it was located. Why wasn't I told? I asked them. Because if we had just told you outright, you probably wouldn't have believed us. Admit it, they responded. And I can admit they were probably right. If they had
Well, yeah,
mentioned
you
it
give
on day
somebody a
one,
job like,
I would have laughed it
there's
off as either
spooky
messing
shit
with
that
the new
happens
guy
here.
or
Like,
just silly stories. So I can't blame them. I worked at that hospital for a year before being transferred to a different site. Still a hospital, but this one doesn't have an ER, ICU, or a morgue. So I feel better about it. My coworkers are great, and the job still pays well, and I genuinely want to be here. But I still double-check those mirrors when I approach any corner, and I still jump at any sound when I'm alone, at night on the job. And I hope, against hope, that I'll eventually get used to it. My mom's experience with the dead. From Daniela S. My mom was in the hospital when she was 23. She'd gotten in a really bad motorcycle accident and had broken both her legs.
oh,
She'd also hurt her head really bad.
not wearing a helmet
It
probably.
was late in the night, and she woke up from a very restless sleep. But she didn't open her eyes right away for some reason. Something in her told her to keep them shut. My mom is from Vietnam and grew up in a very spiritual family. This subject isn't something she takes lightly. When she finally did open her eyes, it was because of a murmur, like someone was trying to talk to her. Her hospital bed was surrounded by pale people. The whole room seemed to be filled with pale people, all trying to get a good look at her. But as soon as she looked at them, they all began to look down at their feet. She was in such shock that she kind of just calmed down and tried to make sense of it. The murmuring grew louder and louder until it sounded like the whole room was quietly mumbling, dozens of people mumbling to each other, but she couldn't see anyone's lips actually move. Then one of them lifted their hand
right there.
and tried to reach out to her, still not looking at her. That's when my mom began to panic and scream. She
Now
says
it's
it
time
felt
to
like she
panic.
blacked out until a nurse came running in, but my mom was found sitting up in bed. The nurse told her it was probably a hallucination from her
I was
concussion,
thinking that.
and after a long time of soothing her, Mom finally went back to sleep.
No, you were in hell. That's what you died.
She didn't experience anything else until she got pregnant with me, and we moved to Korea. One day, as she was taking the bus, she noticed that amongst a line of people getting on was a very familiar figure, a pale person who only looked at the ground. They boarded the bus. The bus driver didn't even seem to acknowledge them. My mother began to cry and became hysterical when the person moved down the middle of the bus. It was then she saw that they seemed to be floating. Their feet were flat against nothing beneath them. An older woman came to comfort her, and when Mom looked back where the person had been, they were gone. From that day until we moved to America, she had no further problems. Eventually, she would be pregnant with my brother, and she began seeing these people everywhere, in the stores, in the streets, and even outside our home.
Fucking
It
does
was
they
a difficult
live?
pregnancy. She ended up going to the
Well, I
hospital
guess she
a
would
number
need
of
sunglasses
times
if
with
it's
smaller
they live.
complications. When she was there, she would scream and cry if she was ever left alone. In the hospitals, it's where she saw them most. She said they were everywhere.
I should
Every
not
which
have
way
drank
she looked,
alcohol before
they were
this.
there. The only way she'd feel safe was if someone was with her, because then the strange pale people wouldn't come any closer. The night after she gave birth to my brother, we were all sleeping in one room because she'd been pretty wrecked by the delivery. The hard pregnancy was nothing compared to actually giving birth to him. Dad says she nearly died, but I don't know how much of that is true. She woke up again in the middle of the night with my brother next to her, and again her bed was surrounded by those people. One of them was holding
Sheesh,
her
won't
hand
they
on the baby's
fuck
forehead,
off?
and at first my mom freaked until she noticed how my brother was pale. But instead of calling out for help, she didn't move. The pale woman stroked the baby's hair over and over until he began to grow pink again, and finally he took a breath. Then she woke up in the morning as a nurse came in to look at the baby. The pale people were gone. Dad and I were still sleeping, and nothing seemed different. The nurse looked over my brother and said that he was fine. Mom says that at that moment, she realized that whoever they weren't trying to hurt or scare her. She thinks they're just lost souls or something of the sort, and that her son did almost die that night. But one of them helped him back to life. Then again, maybe it was all dreams,
Yeah,
hallucinations.
That's probably what it was.
But she tells this story with such sincerity that I can't help but believe her.
Especially you said when anyone says, well,
Now she only sees a few in times of
a
great stress,
disclaimer like, oh,
and she never gets scared
they're
of them
very
now.
religious. And
But I
it's
still
like, okay,
worry.
well,
I'm not
everything
100%
you say should be
sure
taken with a
they're
grain of salt.
good guys. I'm scared that the one who held her hand on my brother wasn't giving him life, but perhaps had been the one taking it. I've heard of spirits taking living bodies to come back to the real world. I just hope Mom is right about them. The Cold Hallway, from C.E. Scrivener. Everyone has different beliefs in the paranormal, but I've always been fascinated by it. It's sort of a hobby for me, I guess. But after this experience, I'll forever have a new perspective on the unexplained. This happened a few years ago when a friend of mine was in a serious car accident. Me and a group of our friends went to the hospital to visit, but he was still in surgery, so we sat in the waiting room for any news. At one point, I got restless and decided to make my way to the cafeteria for some coffee. It was the very early hours of the morning. As I'm making my way down the somewhat empty halls, I hear footsteps approaching me from behind. I turned, expecting to find a nurse, or maybe one of my friends coming to join me.
But it was John C. Dog.
The corridor was silent, save for the few normal noises like machines or the muffled, distant chatter of workers. Something felt off, but I tried to ignore it, as me not being a fan of hospitals. I turned to continue walking.
I think anyone says, "Oh, I like hospitals."
That's when a sudden feeling washed over me, and I froze in place. You know that tingling feeling you get when someone is standing behind you? Goosebumps wash over you, and you turn expecting to see someone. This is what I did, but I was once again met with the emptiness of the hallway. The feeling persisted, and I felt all the hair on my body standing on end. The air became cold to the point I could see my breath. I couldn't hear the previous sounds of machines or chatting now. It was like a switch was flipped, and everything became muffled. I was petrified. I didn't know what was happening nor what to do. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't work. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. It was like something had taken complete control of me. For what felt like hours being held by this cold, unseen force, I then felt a sudden rush of coldness, as if something had just passed right through me. And just like that, it was gone. I stood there in shock, trying to figure out what had just happened to me. You felt it, didn't you? I suddenly heard a voice, and I looked to find an old woman in a hospital gown walking past me to what I assume was her room. What do you mean? I asked, confused, and she looked back and smiled at me. It comes whenever someone dies around here. Don't worry. It won't hurt you. She spoke almost amused by my shock. What comes? I asked, not really sure if I wanted to know.
She said,
the woman gave me another
Death
smile. The Reaper, honey. After that exchange, I noped out of there at record speed, nearly falling over my own feet, until I made it to the waiting room. I chose not to share my experience with my friends. They would have just told me I was tired, but I knew it was more than that. Sadly, soon after that experience, we received the unfortunate news that our friend had passed away. His brain injury was too severe. We went home in complete silence, and the next day, I could not stop thinking about what happened. What I felt that day, I know was not natural. Could I have really encountered a Reaper?
Wouldn't that be natural?
And I can't help but wonder.
Yeah, people die all the time. Wouldn't that be a natural thing? If an actual Reaper exists, if that's a real thing, that would be natural.
Ghost in the Asylum. From Insulting. I have a very real ghost encounter to tell you.
Oh, do you?
It happened at a very populated haunted attraction. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum is a hospital in West Virginia that is rumored to be haunted. And let me tell you that there is no rumor about it, because I know it's 100% true. It was Halloween, I was 17 and had a bunch of friends with me at the time. First, I've got to explain that the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum offers you a deal. If you pay $100 a person, you can stay the night at the haunted hospital. And if you stay till 5 a.m., you get 70% of your money back. We all decided that this year was the year we were going to stay the night. The nighttime stay didn't start until 11 p.m., so we decided to go do the haunted house tour with a couple of other spooky things to wait it out.
Hell, I've stayed in
When 11
clubs
p.m.
longer
came
than that.
around, we hurried and ran to the front doors of the asylum and walked in. There were 6 of us in total, 3 guys and 3 girls. It was $600 to do this
Perfect
haunted
orgy.
night stay. When you stay the night at this haunted hospital, you're given an EMF reader and a flashlight. They took our phones because they didn't want us to use the flash or to use the flashlight on them. We were so lucky because we were the only group that was staying the night on Halloween. So after they went over the rules with us, we would be on our own until 5 a.m. Well, if you could last that long. I'll tell you a little bit about the haunted asylum.
And this alcohol is
It has a
hitting my
total
ass.
of 3 floors and was constructed in the 1800s. At first, it was a hospital meant to house older, sick patients and to give them the best care they could.
Oh, that's this. I
But the
was like,
200
fuck
limit
was that?
quickly turned to
So I
2,000.
think someone blew their
The
horn
hospital was so
outside. Like it
packed.
sounded like a
They had
truck.
people on hospital beds in the
At the
hallways.
same time as it started.
Now, our group was aware that this place was a place where people would send their loved ones. It said their loved ones would be experimented on and often killed.
Loved ones.
But of course, this
They
is what
love
excited us
they
about
love these
staying
people.
the night,
That's why they send
as
them
well
here,
as the thought of catching a
to be
glimpse of a
experimented
ghost.
on.
At 2:40 a.m., we walked all the halls and looked in all the rooms, but never saw anything. But we soon did hear the sound of a girl singing. It seemed to be a lullaby coming from down the hall. I quickly looked at my friends to see their reactions, and they were just as stunned and frightened as I was.
That moment.
We quickly pointed our flashlights down the hallway where the singing was coming from and made our approach to the room. I could finally start to hear the song itself, something like, "Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna kill all of these little girls. And when the little girls are gone, Mama's gonna kill the rest of them."
Bitch, don't even rhyme.
That's when my flashlight went out, then Ashley's, and so did Ethan's. Those were the only 3 flashlights the guy
I
gave
thought he was
us.
gonna start singing
Now we had nothing
1,
to help
2,
us see.
Freddy's coming.
The only thing lighting the hallway and the rooms
3,
was the moonlight
4,
from the full
better
moon
lock
shining
your
through some
door.
cracks in the roof. We were 2 doors away from the room with the singing, and I swear I could make out a half body and face leaning out of the room, looking right at us. Just then, a
Looking
cloud or something must have
right
moved, because a beam of moonlight shone through one of the cracks and right on the figure.
And then
was
they
a woman in
burst
white.
into
Her
flames.
face was scarred up, and she was looking right at us with an
Oh, so she was a
awful grin.
butterface.
Her eyes were as black as the night, and she had this almost rotten egg smell coming off of her.
Oh, never mind. I was about to say
She
she
took a
had
step
fat
out of the
ass,
door
but,
and into the hallway. In horror, she appeared to be holding the severed arm of a child. She starts to take steps towards us, but has a funny movement to her, almost like she's glitching one foot after another. The smell gets worse as she approaches. Then a cloud or something blocks the moonlight again, and she vanishes. I started to walk backwards, shaking and wanting to soil myself. I'd never been so scared. Travis.
The hospital is like one
Someone
of the first 3
whispered
syllable
right
words
beside
I
me.
learned how to
I
speak.
could hear my name.
Just every time I say it, like, oh, I remember that.
You and your friends
Are
will
dead.
never leave this place.
You and your friends are
Quickly,
dead.
I scream for it to shut up, and I turn
was that
180
at,
degrees. We all take off
Was
in a
that the
dead
Dark
sprint
Knight when
towards
the
the
dude in
stairs.
that bank? He was like,
Such
you
a
know whose
long
bank
run,
this
and
is?
I can hear
You and your
someone
friends are
behind us,
dead.
dragging their feet, knocking things over in the hall. As I look back, some more moonlight is coming through, giving me just
That
enough
was a good
light
movie.
to see that woman sprinting at us, screaming our names. I almost tripped over the railing down the staircase as we all ran over each other to get to the front door. But there was a problem. They don't want you to leave without letting a staff member know, so the front doors are locked, and the only way to let someone know that you want out is to ring a bell next to the door that will alert someone to come let you out. Well, we start ringing the hell out of that bell, but I could hear just the lowest and quiet whisper.
I'd have kicked the door down.
Saying, Travis. Travis.
Don't they know y'all names and shit? They could just be doing
I glance back one more time. I see her at the top of the steps looking down on us with that god-awful grin. Right after I saw her, the door swung open as we basically stampeded over the staff member who unlocked it for us. We were
You
safe.
couldn't even stay until 5.
They fixed up some hot cocoa and let us explain what happened.
Bunch of bitches.
The spooky thing is that the staff didn't have the reaction I was looking for. They didn't laugh or say we were lying. They had a look of, I know exactly what you saw. Needless to say, after this encounter, we never stayed the night there again. We still do go every year to the haunted house part, but I will not ever set foot back in that asylum. To the listeners out there, believe me or not, but I encourage you to come to Florence Allegheny Lunatic Asylum and experience it yourself.
Asylums are always scary, because especially if you know the history,
there.
the way
And that ghost lady we
people
saw,
treated
she's
patients
supposedly named Emily.
back in the day.
And supposedly back in
Like,
1867,
you would think, yeah,
she
it'd be
was taking care of a little girl,
You'd be thinking it's a
but
bunch
not
of
in a loving way.
just
She could not
restless
stand
or
the girl
vengeful
crying.
spirits. In
So
there.
after singing her a
Good,
lullaby,
'cause
she
people-
smothered the girl with a pillow. And, well, you can probably guess the rest. Never look behind you. From Paranormal Poltergeist 666.
Interesting, man.
I come from a small town in Virginia. This town also happens to be home to a well-known abandoned insane asylum. In simple terms, the building sits overlooking my small town and was originally opened as a school in the 1890s, but was shut down in 1911 after a few homicides. In 1916, it was reopened as an experimental
After a
psychiatric
few
facility.
mishaps, it was shut
There were
down.
constant issues with overcrowding and negligence. The hospital was shut down in 2003. If the story behind the building isn't enough to keep you away, let my experience be a warning to you to stay out. It all began a few months ago when the owners of the building began to advertise a public paranormal investigation event. As I'd always been fascinated by the paranormal, I decided to buy my boyfriend and I tickets to the event. I had just started making a YouTube channel and had decided that this would make a great first video. However, that video never made it onto my channel.
Because it was
weeks later,
copyright
I stood
claimed.
outside of the beautifully broken building with amazement in my eyes. I always saw beauty in destruction when it came to abandoned buildings like this one. As soon as we were escorted inside of the main area of the building, the atmosphere changed quickly. A feeling of dread surrounded me, and it suddenly felt as though I had an extra 100 pounds on my shoulders. The air was so heavy it felt as though I was suffocating. I decided to ignore the uneasiness around me, and I took a deep breath as I followed the group up the stairway.
Why
into the
did he
patient
said
corridors.
that made me think of Tommy
The tour
Boy?
guide began to tell the story
Maybe I'll
of a
watch that
10-year-old boy
tonight.
who became a patient to the hospital
I
in the
wonder. I
1940s.
remember recording myself
But
watching.
unfortunately,
do a
he
reaction
died a few
to it.
weeks later. As soon as the tour guide finished his sentence with, "and then he died," a door to my left suddenly swung open with violent force and slammed into the wall behind it, allowing pieces of drywall to fall to the floor. I flung my body back towards my boyfriend, and my heart began to race. However, I decided to continue the tour anyway. Eventually, it concluded with little interaction from spirits. But then the real horror began. My boyfriend and I split off with some other people and made our way down the stairs toward the basement for the investigation portion of the night. I'd always heard that the basement was one of the most active spots in the building, so I wanted to set the camera up there and try to capture something. As we were making our way down the corridor, my boyfriend and the other 5 or 6 people were a few feet ahead of me talking amongst themselves. I followed behind them at a slow pace, as I wasn't sure I wanted to be down here after what I had experienced upstairs.
Just in case I need to turn around
All
and
of a
run.
sudden, I felt a tug on the back of my shirt, and I heard a harsh whisper say my name.
Jenny.
The
I
fuck
didn't
was
dare
that?
turn to
Carnage?
look and see what was standing behind me.
Venom?
Instead, I broke free from the grasp of this thing and sprinted to join the rest of the group in the middle of the corridor.
Fucking.
A little bit of time
fucking,
had passed, and my
symbiote
boyfriend and I decided to set up our
attached to you?
camera in the
What, a
morgue,
symbiote?
which was a portion of the basement. We wanted to make an attempt to communicate with the spirits through flashlight signals. "Is there anyone here?" I asked, pointing towards the flashlight that I
So
had propped up on
cliche.
a small wooden
Is there
chair.
anyone here?
If so, make this
Man,
light
if I was
turn
a
off.
ghost and it was a flash, somebody, I'd be like, fucking
Immediately, the
flashlight.
flashlight begins to frantically flash on and
Just
off,
smack it up
and
there.
I feel the same tug on the back of my shirt.
Jenny.
It repeated its harsh whisper again. It repeated it over and over.
Keep making me think
I
of
did all I
fucking
could
Venom.
to attempt to break free from the
Like
force
Jenny.
behind me. However, this time I could not move. I screamed at my
You
boyfriend
feel
to
my
get
tongue on
help,
the back of
and
your
he
shit.
quickly
Like I
ran
said,
out the
if I
door
was
and into
if
the
I was a
corridor.
ghost, I'd be like,
However, it felt like fire was burning at my skin,
fucking body
on my
slam
back.
your ass.
And all of a sudden I had an overwhelming urge to turn around in an attempt to make the pain stop.
Don't turn around, you're gonna turn to
I
salt.
swiftly maneuvered my body to face towards the force and immediately made contact with glowing maple-colored eyes of a tall shadow figure behind me. I felt myself stop screaming and my body froze up. I stood staring at the shadow figure as a sinister smile spread across its face. As I continued to stare into its eyes, I felt drawn towards it. It felt like hours before my boyfriend ran back in with a security guard, when I knew in fact it had only been a few minutes. Just as they frantically burst through the door, the force released its grip on me and dissipated, as if it had never been there. I felt as though I was in a trance while my boyfriend grabbed all the equipment and grabbed
He's
my
like, man, we
wrist,
need to leave.
dragging me up the stairs. Once we arrived in the parking lot, I was finally able to break free from that trance I was in and begin to cry and break down. That was the scariest thing I'd ever experienced. As I look back on the events now, I would like to think that the events that night were caused by an emotional breakdown from stress. But I think my boyfriend and
Shit,
I
I think the
both
scariest
know it was
experience
far
I
more.
ever had was
Now
my
I'm finding
first
it
night
very
on
difficult not to be drawn to
a
the building
basic
once
training.
again. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. More scary stories are on the way soon, so stay tuned and be sure to send me your story at
I like this
darkstories.org.
music.
Remember, I'm looking for tales about sea monsters and other out-at-sea tales, as
Okay, first off, I'm gonna say, if you can be a ghost, I am going to be one. Hopefully, it goes by Frighteners rules, where if you don't go into the light, and they said, well, like a few years, the light will come back and then you can go into it. Hopefully, it's not like Supernatural Rules, the TV show, where if you don't go with the Reaper, then you don't go. You stay on Earth until some handsome young men come and burn your bones in salt and fire, and then you go to purgatory. Cause like people better hope that shit is not real. Cause I am fucking with everybody, and I'm like serious. I'm gonna be like these ghosts where they be like, if you're here, show us a sign. I'm gonna pick up a chair and literally just break it over, break it over somebody's fucking back. I'm gonna be fucking with people. I'm gonna like kids. I'm like, you wanna fly? I'm gonna pick them up and fly up on like a roof and then put them back down. Cause they kids, they stupid. They don't know. Stupid, dumb, idiot children don't know. But adults, oh, I'm gonna be doing clothesline from hell, random people. I'm gonna be in places where they gonna be like, they gonna think this is haunted. Oh man, I'm gonna make myself visible on camera, but like, all of a sudden a chair gonna be picked up and get thrown across the. Somebody gonna get Batista bombed onto a table. People better hope that shit isn't real. I don't think it's real, but I mean, if I found out it is when I die, oh my god, I'm about to have some fun for about at least 3 to 5 years. Like I said, I hope it's like Frighteners rules, where you don't have to go and then they come and the portal opens back up some years later. But if I have a choice, oh yeah, you ain't gotta go right now. Like, oh man, whew. I just thinking about it just fills me with glee. Just to be fucking with people, like, cause I hate the ghost channels where they be doing shit and they be like fucking with you hear. Oh, I heard this noise, and I hate them because I think they fake. But like I'll be like, oh you gonna get the real thing now, boy. Like I'm gonna be choke slamming motherfuckers, hitting people with steel chairs, and we gonna have a fucking wrestling match up in here. And then I'm gonna do that thing in like Supernatural where I just snap my fingers and all the doors are locked now. You can't get out, or they blocked with some type of force that you can't even break the door down. And oh, you stand in here, son. You stand here till the sun come out. We about to have. I'm gonna be like Buzz. Like you're going nowhere. I got you for 3 hours. 3 hours of playtime. Oh boy, I better hope this shit ain't real, and that I don't get to be a ghost, cause whew, it's gonna people gonna be like people gonna be ghosts really do exist, cause I'm gonna be just fuck. I'm gonna be uppercutting dudes in the nuts. Like, I'm gonna be ninja kicking people in the back of the face. Like it's gonna be. In 3 years, I ain't gonna get tired of that. I just can leave, as long as, especially if you can travel. Now, if I get stuck in a house, then yeah, I'm like, fuck, I fucked up. But if I can move, like, but then you like, what about ghosts who haunt like highways? Like they outside, unless you like they can't leave this highway. But in that case, I'm gonna down Highway 66. Go from Chicago to LA, fucking with people. Just be in their car, be like, and do some shit like this. Be sitting in the car, they turn her and look at me and be like, just throw up. Oh man, you motherfuckers better hope that shit ain't real. Ooh, boy. But anyway, I hope y'all enjoyed my reaction. And if you did, make sure to hit that thumbs up button down below. Make sure to subscribe if you're new here. Hit the bell if you want to be notified when I upload new videos. Share this video. Comment down below. I'll see y'all next time. Peace.